Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim Priester from Irish Illustrated, joined by John Bryce of Football Scoop. JB, we are just a few days away from the start of 2025 preseason practice at Notre Dame. I think we're all looking forward to this. I don't know that I've ever, what's the phrase? We're way out in front of our skis. I feel like I think
Over
I
a
can't
few.
remember Notre Dame fans being more excited about a season. I was around in 89, the year after they won a national title, but there was no internet, there was no social media, there was none of that. And the excitement generated about Notre Dame is off the chart, man, off the chart.
It is, and frankly, I think it's pretty warranted. Obviously, there's the one glaring question mark of who will officially be the starter and how will that individual comport himself after earning the starting nod. But there's plenty of reason for the optimism and the enthusiasm. It's a new world with the 12-team playoff. We saw what Notre Dame did last year in the first iteration of the 12-team playoff. The program has built up great depth under Marcus Freeman. It's recruiting for the future at an unbelievable pace, which I know we're about to get into. And so, yeah, players were due to report back by last night after having a few days off. They wrap up the second session of summer with a lift tomorrow. I think Team Photo Day is pretty soon to follow, not long after that. So, final lift session today and tomorrow, Team Photo Day. And then get right into some OTAs on Wednesday and crank it up on the practice field right after that.
Of course, JB was talking about the quarterback situation, and if you look around, the quarterback setting with CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey, it looks like a great football team all around it. We don't know exactly what the first time starter at quarterback would do. He has to start at Miami and then 2 weeks later play Texas A&M, and a more challenging schedule than last year, certainly. But if you're ever going to start a young quarterback, this is the kind of team that you want to do it with because you have a veteran offensive line. I know there's been some mishaps along the way here this summer with the offensive line, including JB, you've been high on Sullivan Absher for quite some time, and like you feel good about having to insert him into the starting lineup in place of Charles Jagusah, but it hurts your depth after that.
Yeah, it hurts your depth. Look, yeah, you're replacing a guy that people a lot smarter than me project as an NFL player in Charles Jagusah and a guy who can have an NFL decision as soon as the end of this season with a guy who, as noted, people on campus have told me would start for dozens of programs in Sullivan Absher. But you need the depth. We saw it last year. I thought one of the maybe unheralded components of what Notre Dame did so well over the course of college football's first ever 16 game season was the way that it managed things and the way that it had Charles Jagusah ready to come back from injury in the playoffs just when he was needed, the way that it was able to bring guys along and bring them back and rest them and have them ready. So we know Notre Dame has the blueprint for that. But yeah, losing Jagusah for as long as he's going to be lost, which, mid-October sounds like best case scenario. That's significant. And then he's still going to have to regain some strength, obviously, in the upper body and that arm specifically, and work his way back in. So yeah, that's a tough loss, and that's a loss, as you note, that not just to that one position. It's a loss to the depth. Absher, even last year, played on a lot of special teams when he wasn't starting. And so that's one guy you take out of some of your special teams packages and have to replace with somebody else.
Yeah, Absher is like truly a guy that was the first guy off the bench, probably at all five positions, which is a rarity. Since we took last week off, felt very weird going a whole week without a podcast, but we are back at it now. And during that time, I had an opportunity to finish up our first rate series with coaching, and then the last thing is schedule. Scheduled, as I mentioned here a bit ago, Notre Dame's a little bit more difficult than last year, but and in there I project them about the middle of the pack of among Notre Dame and the 12 opponents. Man, I tell you what, Arkansas, every team in the SEC faces a difficult schedule. Arkansas is particularly challenging. They face like right before they face Notre Dame, they're at Mississippi and they're at Memphis. Memphis, a non-conference team, but projected to win the AAC again. That's an extremely difficult schedule. Syracuse has no chance of winning 10 games again. And number one, they've lost a lot of people. including their nearly 5,000-yard passer from last year and a whole bunch of receivers. But they have on their schedule Tennessee, UConn, non-conference. They were 9-4 last year. Um, let's see, where am I here? Because they play Colgate. That's their easy one. They're at Clemson. They play Duke at home. Duke won 9 games last year. They're at SMU, Pittsburgh at home, at Georgia Tech. I mean, those are mid-range teams in the ACC, North Carolina, and then they conclude in November with at Miami and at Notre Dame before playing Boston College. They can't possibly win 10 games again, and that's why we include schedule on that listing. Otherwise, I've always said it's an evaluation of each team's talent, but schedule plays a role. There's no doubt about it.
A huge role, and that Arkansas schedule, frankly, is a widowmaker. And you that's a brutal schedule for anybody. But Sam Pittman's going into a completely hot seat year, so that's really rough for him. And pointed out to me, I talked to some college folks over the weekend. You know, they're playing Arkansas State for the first time ever, and Arkansas State will view that game as its Super Bowl. I know Butch Jones well. I know he will have his team amped up for that contest. He'll view it as a chance to not only showcase the Arkansas State program, but to showcase that he's the guy that did have some big wins at Tennessee before that train fell off the tracks. So yeah, even the money games are brutal contests for Arkansas. Ryan Silverfield, a guy I know fairly well, on top of the Memphis program coming off a 10-win season. They have just about as much NIL money as any group of five program out there, arguably more when you see they're trying to throw 200 million at the Big 12 and the Big 12 still says no thank you. So brutal schedule. I'm wholly in agreement with you on Syracuse. I don't think they can win 10 games again. Like just nationally, I know we're jumping around a little bit, but I have Syracuse and Indiana as two of those specific teams, along with obviously Colorado that I think take major steps back from successful seasons a year ago.
Yeah, Arkansas State won 8 games last year. Again, I know people always like, well, that was last year. Well, teams generally follow a pattern, not every year, of course, but Arkansas State, as you said, an experienced coach. They're rebuilding a little bit in terms of personnel, but that's still a challenging one for Arkansas, which has a whole bunch of challenges. And then wrapping up the whole first rate series, we rated coaches. I have Notre Dame number one, not just because of Marcus Freeman. I know as soon as the ratings go out, it's like, well, this head coach versus that head coach. To try to go a little bit deeper than that. And when you look at Mike Denbrock as offensive coordinator, Marty Biaggi, a great special teams coach, and Chris Ash following Al Golden, Notre Dame's at the top there. I look at Miami. They brought in Corey Heatherman from the defensive coordinator from Minnesota. Now, Heatherman followed Joe Rossi, and so he benefited from that at Minnesota, but that's still a good coach. Kind of the talk of the coaching changes this year. And he's at Miami under head coach Mario Cristobal.
Yeah, exactly. I like that staff. You know, Shannon Dawson now there
Yeah.
running the offense for Mario and the Miami Hurricanes. But you're right. Like there's some really good staffs that Notre Dame will face this year. But when you look at the big four of Notre Dame, and I think it's really a big five because I think you consider Lauren Lando as a key staff member as well. And we see what he's done. And again, the way that Notre Dame managed the playoff run last year. And Marcus talked at the time, well, Lauren had been in the NFL. He kind of knew that. Dylan had been in the NFL. He had that wisdom and kind of that viewpoint. So I think all those things are crucial. But yeah, there's no chance I would disagree with you on with Notre Dame's schedule this year as having Notre Dame's coaching staff as number one.
Moving on from schedule and projections and stuff like that, since we last had a podcast, Notre Dame received a verbal commitment from quarterback Teddy Gerard, listed by some as a 3-star. I think those that have watched film of him know that he's an absolute 4-star. Man, I really like this kid on a couple different levels, and I'll tell you what levels those are, JB. But put in your 2 cents here about what Notre Dame is getting in class of 2027 quarterback Teddy Gerard.
Yeah, I mean, look, start first with his offer list, and it was truly a who's who. When you talk about a Georgia on there, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, so many other major programs, 34 offers, I think, in total. He's prototypical size, love his frame, love his decision making, his accuracy is off the charts, and then he's got a very live arm to go with that accuracy. Sometimes especially when it's a prospect 2 years out. You see the live arm, you don't see the accuracy. He shows advanced metrics to go with arm strength and the accuracy.
I would agree. Like some of his freshman footage is a little rough. He took a massive, massive step up his sophomore season, and you can read in the film room on Teddy Gerard on Irish Illustrated. But some of the things I like, JB, the quick release from decision in his head to throw to actual release of the football is absolutely outstanding. That's a trait you don't see very often with young quarterbacks. You don't always see it with even really good quarterbacks, but the quickness of the release. And there's a phrase that we use, and I think sometimes it's difficult to understand when we say the ability to throw people open. That's exactly what Teddy Gerard can do because he will when he releases the football many times, the receiver isn't open. When the football arrives in the vicinity of the receiver, he's open. That's throwing people open.
That speaks to his understanding of the game, his instincts, and again, it reinforces the accuracy because you can't throw guys open if you're not putting the ball where it needs to be.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A couple other things. I just think that he has a great presence in the pocket and his ability to throw on the run accurately, rolling to his right. I don't think I saw anything rolling to his left, which is difficult for all right-handed quarterbacks, but he's really good at that. JB, I want to jump into a story that I want you to do every summer. Somewhere along the line, I remind you, JB, we need the support staff story. You did a great one that came out today, I believe.
Yep.
The B squad, is that what is that how they're referred to? The
Yeah.
support staff guys. And if you could talk a little bit about those people, and I wrote a recent story on former Notre Dame defensive lineman Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa, who's now part of that group. But the guy that I was particularly interested in was Andy Boo, who had previously worked with Chris Ash, and what impact he might have on the defensive scenario.
Yeah, I think that again, Notre Dame has increased resources under Marcus Freeman to have a support staff that's as good and deep as it is. It is elevated pay in some of those positions. You reference Andy Boo, who had been at Illinois the past several years. He was Chris Ash's defensive coordinator. Final year that Ash was head coach at Rutgers. He's got other power conference experience in the old Pac-12. He's been in the SEC. He's just a veteran guy, but when you talk to people in the program, he's a no ego guy. He's unassuming. He's willing to do help any level of defense that's needed. He's coached obviously just about all over the field in his coaching career, so he's got good perspective in the secondary, but he's also led defenses before. So he was an addition to the staff right around the 1st of March, I believe, right before spring camp opened. And then when you talk to people on campus, he's just really transitioned seamlessly. Sometimes, you have an older guy who's been around a lot and he can have an ego in some of those positions. And I know some guys that's been the case for in the SEC, guys that have been coordinators or head coaches find themselves senior analyst roles and they're the most difficult person to get along with in the office. And I was just flatly told nothing could be further from the truth with Andy Boo. And then you talk about a guy like Jesse Schmidt, who's now a veteran on this staff. He's a guy that's tried to, some MAC schools specifically have tried to poach him to be their special teams coordinator. He was a standout player at Purdue, had a little bit of luck in the NFL before a back injury, I think, forced him to stop his playing days. He was also on staff for a bit at Tulane. So he's Marty Biagi's right-hand man. He's a really, really good asset for them. I know at the wide receiver position that Notre Dame has upgraded itself there, or feels like, I shouldn't say upgraded, but really likes who they brought on there on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, we know about Javon Codlin, and he's a guy that they've sent out on the road recruiting, along with Harris Biven, along with Sebastian Seabass. So it gives you an idea of how much the coaching staff trusts these guys when you know that they're being sent out on the road recruiting. Dominic Spalding, that was the name that was escaping me, who's now helping with the wide receivers after Michael Bearden got hired by the Cleveland Browns. I do think that's key to note that two analysts off last year's staff got NFL jobs, and Michael Bearden with the Browns and Mike Moon with the Cincinnati Bengals. He was one of the people that Al Golden immediately took with him to the NFL. That speaks volumes in and of itself. Kurt Rawlings is a guy. I referenced this in the story, and again, it's coaching parlance, much like the people like to talk about me using the phrase "throw game" in the coaching world. It's he should have his own room, and when you hear that about an analyst, you can pay attention to them more. And at least four different guys on this list, I was told he should have his own room. He'll have his own room. I think that's significant. Kurt Rawlings, one of those guys, traces back to Cincinnati, even though he's a Yale guy. He was briefly at Cincy with Gino, followed him to Wisconsin for a couple of weeks, and very quickly came on down to Notre Dame when Gino left Wisconsin to come to Notre Dame. So those are some of the high notes on it. Rob Delaney was technically, I think, the last hire of Harry Heastan and Tommy Rees to be the assistant offensive line coach. And I think that's one of the toughest positions to evaluate and coach. And so I will defer to people that are exponentially football smarter than me when they rave about Rob Delaney.
I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, see, we've seen the improvements that have taken place under Marcus Freeman. We've seen it in a variety of areas within the football program, but I don't think there's any doubt that the last year and this year, the support staff, Notre Dame's never had anything like that, and they've expanded it. There's no doubt they've put more resources to it, but. And you talked about guys on the road. Myron Tagovailoa Mosa was
Yep.
part of three, I believe, three recruiting visits that he was on, and just real briefly about MTA. I mean, just one of the most likable, uh, reliable guys you could have on your football team, both as a player and now within the recruiting department. I would recommend or advise people to check out that story on irishillustrated.com. And you talked about no egos. Trent Miles is a guy that's at Notre Dame, and the reason he's at Notre Dame is because of his multiple decade relationship with Mike Denbrock.
Yep.
I knew Trent Miles and Mike Denbrock in the early 2000s when they came in with Tyrone Willingham. And so, Trent Miles, I did a feature story on him last summer, and just the way he talked about Notre Dame and what it meant to him. He hasn't made, he was a head football coach at Indiana State. He's not raking in millions doing that,
Right.
but he has had a pretty good career, and he's made his fair amount of money, and he's down the home stretch of his career, and he wants to be at Notre Dame. So when Mike Denbrock went back to Notre Dame for the third time and then gave Trent Miles a call, there wasn't much doubt that Trent Miles was going to do that. Last thing I want to throw in here, JB, in segment one, we heard just today that Wake Forest will be on the Notre Dame 2027 schedule. That game will be played in Charlotte, which is a wonderful location to go cover a football game and to go as a fan to watch the Fighting Irish. So that's something to look forward to in the future. We'll be back. Segment two, burning up the boards. Segment two, we call it burning up the boards, and we start with a question from Henry Beatty. What should fans be watching for when Notre Dame releases updated heights and weights? JB, they don't do that again, do they? They did that at the start
They,
of,
they did that at the start of the summer. I don't
and
know if they will.
I don't
Sometimes
think they do.
I don't think so. We'll get a roster sheet handed out at the first practice later this week. I don't know that that will be any different than what we're seeing online now. I don't know. Maybe they do one after the completion of the second set of summer session, which, as we already noted, ends tomorrow, and then they have team photo this week. So maybe when they get them for team photo, they'll do some final camp measurements or something like that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. If there are updated ones, I want to see is Anthony Knapp up above 296. He went from 294 to 296. Is he just going to hover right around there? Can he nudge up to 305? Something like that. That would be one for me. What about the defensive interior? Anything of note with Rubio or Onye or a couple of those other guys? We've already discussed Bryce Young is up around 6'8", 272, something like that. So we hinted at that one at the very early onset of summer, and then those measurements came out. So I don't know. We'll see if we get anything updated between now and the end of the week when practice starts, or even between now and when the season starts in about 33 days.
Yeah, I think they'll keep. We were given updates the beginning of June. Tim O'Malley went in great detail about some of the gains and the losses. I think the biggest gain that saw among players that needed it was the freshman receiver Scrap Richardson, who came in weighing 169 and is now up to 185. Be interested to see how he looks. I don't, people, it's funny. I think T.O. said this before. People were always worried about how big is Emil Wagner, and now nobody gives a damn because he played 16 straight games and handled himself well. For the record, 6'6", 296. I think people showed a little bit of alarm in seeing Kedron Young at 5'11", 242, but he was essentially at that weight in the spring, and I did not think that that was bad weight for him, especially when you're looking for a true power back. I think he carries that well. I don't think that that 242 limits him. Now he's in the midst of summer conditioning. I'm sure he will be in tremendous shape, but I don't think those are going to change. I'm trying to think of some other. I was surprised to see Jared Dawson at 288. He was listed at 300
Yeah,
when he came in. That suggests to me that he's a three technique and that Gabe Rubio is playing the nose. Rubio is at 319, I believe it is.
yeah.
I don't know if maybe I didn't change that. I'm looking at my updated heights. I created a little flip chart that I carry with me throughout the season for just things like this. When you're in a podcast and you're trying to think of every defensive tackle on the list and you have to check it, at least at my age, you do. Who else? I'm not sure that anybody else that there were
Yeah,
massive gains. It seems like there were some. Oh, and Traore's up 9 pounds from where he was before the start of last season. I can only think that that's good weight.
yeah.
He's 6'4", 247. I think those are good numbers for him. We'll see, but I don't think they update it again. So we will essentially be going off of those numbers as we get into preseason camp. We have a question from Jay Rexroth. He asked about 5 questions. All of them were serious concerns on his part about the upcoming team, which is, like I said, I think the expectations are perfection for Notre Dame after the run last year, and I understand it because they do have a lot of guys coming back. But Jay Rexroth has some concerns, and one of them is this. I'd like to raise a concern regarding the potential challenges Notre Dame may face at the start of the season. With Chris Ash leading the defense for the first time, there's uncertainty about how quickly the unit can adapt, especially against a talented quarterback like Miami's Carson Beck. What say you, JB?
Well, I think it's noteworthy that Chris Ash has repeatedly said that he's not here to make wholesale changes. He's not going to do a bunch of stuff to something that was already working incredibly well. He wants to enhance, not overhaul. And I think that's significant. The biggest thing he's done is we know they added some zone capabilities in the spring and have continued to just try to fine tune that so they can deploy it when they feel like they need to. But you have a bunch of veteran guys back. Yes, you're going to have a little bit of different look with the defense and kind of the communication there. I think that's the big thing. Is it going to be Drake Bowen doing most of the communication? Probably. Exactly how do they handle the changes in communication with no Jack Kaiser to lean on anymore? I think that's much more about the players handling communication than it is Chris Ash. Now, I think it's fair to raise the question about Ash because he's returning to the college game and he'd been out for a couple of years. So I think it's changed. It continues to evolve and have different changes. There were no helmet communications the last time Chris Ash coached in college. So those are things to note, but it's just not at the it's an adjustment period. It always is. So I don't want to act like there's nothing to that. But Carson Beck's adjusting to a brand new entire offense and a brand new program, and Miami itself is adjusting to a brand new defensive coordinator, and I think a coaching staff that has maybe 5 new coaches in total on it.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to mention, as I did in segment one, Corey Heatherman, the defensive coordinator, he's new to the situation too. So, I mean, I get the concern because we've talked about it many times that in Al Golden's first year, following Marcus Freeman as defensive coordinator, who followed Clark Lee as defensive coordinator, Notre Dame was abysmal in the red zone. They were pretty good in pretty much everything else, if I recall correctly. But yeah, there's an adjustment, and to your point, that I'm sure that Chris Ash is adhering to that concept of not trying to reinvent the wheel and simply trying to build upon what Al Golden did. I think that's the right approach, but I think sometimes we as Notre Dame media slash then Notre Dame fans only look at Notre Dame and not the other team. And Miami's dealing with some of these situations as well. For example, Notre Dame has Marty Biagi, arguably the best special teams coach in the country, or certainly one of the best. Well, last year, Miami, it's their second year special teams coordinator now, Danny Kelter. They were 122nd in kick coverage. They were 79th in punt returns. They were 79th in punt coverage. So Notre Dame should have a significant advantage in special teams, which, as we know, on several occasions last year, certainly tilted the game in Notre Dame's favor. So I understand the question completely. As I said, Jay Rexroth has a lot of concerns, and this is one too, but I wouldn't be overly concerned, especially as it relates to Miami. And let me say this about Carson Beck, and I've been the one saying this is the best opposing quarterback that Notre Dame will face this year. Been a lot of questions about his health. I don't think that that's going to be an issue. I've been told that it's not going to be an issue, but I will say this about Carson Beck. If he has time to throw, he'll pick you apart. If he doesn't, he will
Yeah.
get sacked and he will throw interceptions. So Notre Dame has a good chance. Would you say, JB, with their pass rush against him?
I do like it, especially with this much time to prepare. They're not preparing for Carson Beck off of you know, for week two after having a difficult opponent week one. They get months on end to prepare for Beck. In a lot of ways, they started preparing for Beck last year when they were playing Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, even though he was announced as out. It was still basically the same offense that Beck was operating, just that Stockton could run it a little bit more. The last thing I would note on Jay Rex Roth's question, and look, it's fair to question that. There's always unease. There was unease about Marcus Freeman coordinating the Notre Dame defense for the first time down at Florida State a few years ago after being hired by Brian Kelly. However, I do think it's significant to note, as you've pointed out, the Heatherman hire is a good one for Miami. I like it, but he's taking over because a guy got fired. Chris Ash is here because a guy was doing so well, he's now calling defense in the NFL. I think there is difference, and important to note the difference in the specific situations in that case. As we move on to our next question here from GTR, why is Notre Dame ranked so high in the preseason when they are starting a quarterback that's never played a full game of Division One football? It seems like a recipe for disaster. What say you, Captain Priester?
I understand it, and that's why I say that the optimism is extremely high at an all-time high, and that's with the knowledge of a quarterback that, regardless which of the two, and we expect it to be CJ Carr, in a first-time starting role. But here's the thing, and I think I said in segment one, if you ever are going to have a first-time starter on the road at Miami, it's great to be surrounded by an otherwise what looks to be a great football team. He's got a veteran offensive. Well, I shouldn't say veteran because if you look at the starts, there's pale in comparison to some other schools, especially Texas A&M. But Texas A&M center is coming off an ACL the same way Notre Dame center Ashton Craig is coming off of an ACL. But that's a good offensive line, and Charles Jagusah will be back at some point. Sullivan Absher, I'm sure, will do a fine job as a first-time starter. Once he gets his feet wet, and if he can hold his own against Miami, which I think that he can, he'll just keep getting better with each week. And he's not a returning starter, but I think he'll show himself as a starter throughout the season as it progresses. JB, I'm kind of jumping around here, but I want to throw this in because it's a thought that occurred to me, and I'm going back to when I was talking about the schedule. I had Notre Dame in the middle of the pack. Nobody opens with at Miami and Texas A&M. That in itself put Notre Dame at the most difficult level of schedules to open with, but then it relents a little bit. The other thing was that we talk about coaches. Well, he hasn't been in college, he's been in the NFL. That could be an advantage too. The advanced level of coaching that takes place in the NFL. If an NFL guy goes to the college and then he uses his knowledge judiciously and doesn't overwhelm his players with it, we're talking about the highest level of coaching in the world right now, football coaching. So I don't think that that's necessarily a detriment. But Notre Dame's ranked as high as they are because they got a damn great team with a quarterback that you feel good about as a first time starter.
Yeah, that's a good point on the coaching TP, and ties into something we pointed out much earlier this year, maybe in May, early June, about Marcus's approach, and that is Denbrock and Ash and those guys didn't go out on the road recruiting during that eval period. Marcus wanted to have more of the NFL model. That's why you were able to have a Seabass on the road, or Javon Codlin, J Cod as he's called, or Delaney, or MTA. That's why you had different people out on the road, because Notre Dame's coaches, Denbrock, Ash, Biaggi, those guys primarily stayed in house and were working game plans and were working plans for the summer practice and the season. And so I do think that's a good point. And we know that Marcus Freeman, look, spent a lot of time last summer with Sean Payton and taking some things from him and trying to apply to the Notre Dame program. So Notre Dame continues to adopt more of an NFL model from the top down within its football program.
We have a question from Chris Kosiak. Distinguished gentlemen, I think he's talking to us, JB. If you had to pick two or three guys to buy stock in for quote futures, who are you buying? Not necessarily week one, but by the end of the season and beyond. I think Notre Dame's got a bunch of players with high futures, but who do you have at the top, John?
Yeah, I like that. I rarely get a compliment as nice as distinguished gentleman. So I appreciate that, Chris. I would, we hear all about venture capitalists and private equity. I would want to be a venture capitalist in basically the entire Notre Dame roster. I'll give a couple of names, but again, I think there are a number of quote unquote breakout candidates for Notre Dame. I couldn't buy enough stock this year in KVA or Kingston Viliamuasa, and Bryce Young, as it were. Tay Johnson would be my third one. I had it really impressed upon me in the last 10 days or so. Get ready. Tay Johnson might be headed for one of those Adon Schuler type of breakout seasons in the back end of the Notre Dame defense. So there's three on the defensive side of the ball in a hurry for me. You know, um, Sullivan Absher is going to have the chance that he's been patiently waiting for. Sam Pendleton didn't wait for the opportunity. He went ahead and left, and now he's trying to earn a starting spot at Tennessee. So, and good for Sam. He got a massive payday. Sullivan Absher has stayed, and now all indications are he'll be the top option to earn that starting left guard spot. So can he back up what we've all heard about him, and certainly what everyone on the board likes to razz me about knowing about him is that he does have a lot of potential there. Do we see it? And then finally, beyond that, Eli Raridan has flashed. If he stays healthy, he will be an NFL player a year from now.
In total agreement with KVA. I put out a list today that 10 intriguing guys that when I go out to practice when it starts later this week, that who I will absolutely be looking at. And normally I pick for something like that, I pick people that haven't played a significant role yet or are just starting to blossom. But I put KVA on there because the coaching staff is really, really excited about him. I mean, the day he walked onto the practice field last year for the first time, they knew that they had a great football player, a budding great football player. So I agree with you there. There's no doubt that Bryce Young's ceiling is massively high. And I think, people ask us, well, who's impressing this summer, on the practice field? Tay Johnson is a name that's been thrown out a couple times. He's at 193, which I think is a really good. When you think about how thin he was when you watched him play as a senior in high school, that's a really good number for him. Some other people, I mean, I can list freshmen that had, that arrived in the spring. Elijah Burris, certainly, and then two that just came in June. James Flanagan and Will Black. Everybody's high on them. Cree Thomas is a typical Brophy product when you talk to him, polished, um, great knowledge of the game at such an early age. He's somebody that I would list. I'm really excited to see Dallas Golden. I think Dallas Golden is a cut above type of athlete that could play offense or defense. I think you take a guy like that and you find a defensive player first.
You,
But
I was just going to say you're kind of getting into our next question here,
I
and that's
am. I'm not
okay.
supposed to do that.
It's
All right. Well, let's jump right in there. You're asking it, John.
No, that's fine. We'll just continue this discussion. Jay Harper three, a good one. We've been focused, rightly so, on the 26 class and the considerable recruiting exploits of Notre Dame assembling that group. But he wants to know which freshman this year should we be focused on? Who can we be excited about? You just touched on Burris. I think he's obviously at the top of the list on the offensive side of the ball. Bettis Jr., I think, has shown some things. I think he'll be somebody who's able to carve a role on special teams for Notre Dame. Obviously, Madden Faramo is a physical specimen. Excited to see him hopefully fully healthy after he had the wrist injury in spring that sort of limited him. Will Black, he was number one on Notre Dame's board before he became a top 40 national consensus prospect. So they've been really high on him because of that. I've been eager to see Will Black. But he's at the left tackle position or the tackle position. There aren't many Joe Alts out there who come in and can man that right away, or even there aren't many Anthony Knapps who can do as sturdy a job as Knapp did last year as a true freshman. But for me, those are the guys. There are other ones that will flash. I'm excited about Zachary. Drew Mintock had that great story months ago about the best dunkers on the Notre Dame basketball team, and he did a really tireless job of compiling clips from social media, and Zachary had some of the best dunks of anybody. So the athleticism is there.
Yeah, Zachary is listed. You're right. I jumped the gun with the last question, so I won't mention those guys again. But Zachary is 5'11", 170. I mean that's pretty light. May make it a little bit difficult to make an early impact. You mentioned Framo, in addition to the other ones that I jumped the gun on. But I would say, Eric Schmidt, the kickoff job is
Yes.
waiting right there for him, the freshman kicker who was verbally committed to Wisconsin for a long time. And then when Notre Dame showed interest, he immediately decommitted and joined Notre Dame with a verbal commitment. But, Noah Burnett, hopefully he can get back to that 19 for 20 range that he was in 2023, as opposed to the 15 of 21 in field goals in 22 and 24. I don't know that Eric Schmidt will unseat him. That's why they brought Noah Burnett in. But Burnett is not a kickoff guy. And Eric Goins is gone from last year. Zach Yoakum is gone. He was a kickoff guy from a couple years ago. So they are in significant need of a kickoff man, and maybe Eric Schmidt can fill that role. We have
Good
a
job
quick
by you. Let me just interject real quick. Good job by you bringing up Eric Schmidt, because as noted to me by some people who have seen him now this summer, he's 6'2", 210 pounds.
Yeah,
It was very much emphasized to me. He does not look like a kicker. He's an athlete, and he's done it all. And he did all three in high school. And so will he begin this year by just trying to focus in on, or will he still continue to work punt, kickoff, and place kicking? That will be an underrated element to watch in the limited viewing we get over the course of preseason camp.
I've always been a big favor of kickers that are athletes first, guys that were soccer players
Right.
or a position player on their high school. Give me an athlete over a kicker alone. I realize if you're just a kicker alone, that you've probably devoted more time to your on the practice field. But give me an athlete, and it sounds like Eric Schmidt is that indeed. We have a question from a familiar questioner, Wash Andy. Which three players from the 2024 roster are most likely to go into coaching? I don't think we've ever had this question when their playing careers are over. And which one feels like a head coach to you? Oh boy, that's tough. That's tough to figure out when you're dealing with 19, 20, 20, 21-year-old kids.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely throw Trey Reader's name out there. I think he'll be a coach. He was a walk-on linebacker who played 5 or 6 games last year on special teams and was scout team player of the week multiple times for his work as a linebacker. I think he impressed coaches along the way with just how cerebral he was and kind of how he handled things and just the maturity that he showed even as a walk on. So Trey Reader definitely makes that list for me. Gosh, I'm trying to think beyond that.
Like
I could see Kenny Minchie coaching. He's just got this demeanor about him. Guys gravitate to him. I could definitely see that out of him. And then I think that probably an Anthony Knapp. That might be my third one. So I think I'll go Trey Reader, Kenny Minchie, and Anthony Knapp.
I looked at it, and obviously it's difficult to determine at their age, but I looked at it like, okay, and I not so much in terms of like rah-rah coach, it's cerebral guys. Who are the guys that come into the interview room and you walk away and say, damn, that guy's impressive. The first guy that came to mind for me was Jay Nosberry. He's
Yeah.
always in, he's always interviewed well. He's always come across as a cerebral kind of guy. I have no idea. Most of these guys are probably they're too smart to end up being a football coach, so to speak. They've got higher aspirations with their Notre Dame degree, although you can pretty much make more money in coaching than you can in most occupations. But Jay Nosberry was the first name that came to mind for me. Jadarian Price was somebody else that I thought of that fits that description that I'm giving about cerebral and a great interview. And then I thought about Cree Thomas too, because he was so impressive in the spring as an early entry freshman. So I don't know. I'm not sure which one's the head coach. I thought of Donovan Heinisch, who isn't as big of a personality as Kurt Heinisch is, but I could see Kurt Heinisch definitely as a defensive line coach when his
Oh,
NFL career is up.
let me add one more
All
just
right.
for our job. It's never about us, but how about Carson Hobbs as a head coach? He might be the second coming of Steve Spurrier with some of that confidence.
This
So
this is very true. He came off as a very confident athlete, and we're hoping that he can corral that a little bit and get his way on the field, whether it's a backup nickel or a backup quarterback spot. Speaking of familiar question submitters to Irish Illustrated Insider, CMU Pens fan. And you know what, JB, you probably know. I meant to look up exactly. Anyway, I'll ask a question. Who are the players Notre Dame sent to New York City with Marcus Freeman and insight into who are the favorites to be captains this year? I know Jeremiah Love, Leonard Moore, Eli Raridan went. Who else was on that trip?
Adon Schuler,
Don
Emil
Schuler.
Wagner, and Jordan Faison. So yeah, I think you'll find some captains out of that group. I would be very surprised if uh, Jeremiah Love isn't a captain. I think Schuler will have a chance. You always expect one to two offensive linemen. So even though whether that's Wagner or a Schrouth or a Craig, I would think Schrouth and Craig have great opportunities to become captains on this team. I would think Drake Bowen has a great opportunity to become a captain on this team. Again, as I've noted before, he talked to me in the locker room after the national title loss about shifting forward, examining where they can be better, and already starting to lead going into the offseason. So yeah, I'm bullish on Drake Bowen's captain potential along with some of those offensive linemen I named.
I do want to give credit to RPM underscore go underscore Irish, who also asked a question about the captains. I agree. I think Bowen. I mean, when I asked Chris Ash to name the leaders on the defense in the spring, and he just said one guy. I know we've said that before. He said he said Drake Bowen. I know he's only a junior, but junior captains certainly happen. Now, Jeremiah Love's the best pure football player on the team right now, and those guys tend to be rewarded. I wrote Craig and Wagner. You said Craig and Schrouth. I can't disagree there. We may be forgetting somebody. I don't know that I don't Junior Tui Alamaka may be a little bit understated. Um, but in terms of like I can remember Al Golden talking about just what he meant to the defense when he ascended to the starting lineup with the injuries at defensive end. I don't know exactly, but it's both CMU Pens fan and RPM Go Irish. Good question because it's really wide open this year. I think there are a lot of guys that are good football players that are good leaders. I don't know necessarily how many of those are in the senior class just through attrition, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. JB, take us home.
Nick Dubose. He is most worried or more worried about the Arkansas game than the Texas A&M game. Please tell me I'm crazy. Nick, Tim Priester is about to tell you why you're crazy.
I don't know. I don't think he's crazy. I don't think that Arkansas has nearly the talent that Texas A&M does, having just finished a first-rate series. Um, but I don't think it's crazy because we know college football. Notre Dame's going to go on the road. I think we're all really excited about going on the road to Arkansas for the first time. Notre Dame's never played them. I am particularly really excited now because I just secured a hotel room down there, and I was really, really concerned about the ability to do that within 200 miles of Fayetteville, Arkansas. But I scored one yesterday through some help. Uh, Texas A&M's a better football team, probably better coached at the top.
Yeah.
Um, Notre Dame
For
has 2 weeks to prepare coming after Miami. I get that. I don't think it's crazy. I think that's one of those environments. Look, we know how disappointed the Arkansas fans were when their trip to Notre Dame was canceled because of COVID in 2020. They're going to be they're going to be insane down there when Notre Dame comes. Notre Dame catches a break by playing at noon. I know it may be hotter, but still, it's better to play them at noon than at night when everybody's liquored up and really ready to go. I don't think that's insane, but I will just say I think clearly Texas A&M is a better football team and probably better coached overall. What do you
Yeah,
say?
Nick. Yeah, I think Nick, it's a rational question. You'll understand the concern, and I wouldn't call you crazy if you fretted one of those games more than the other one. I think they're both incredibly winnable games for Notre Dame, but they both present their own potential problems. The thing with Arkansas that I'll say makes me think A&M's the tougher game is, as you noted, A&M is the second week of the season, or the third week, I guess, technically the third week, but Notre Dame's second game, so it's earlier in the year. You expect both teams to be healthier at that point. Notre Dame having 2 weeks to prepare is nice. We know how good Marcus Freeman is historically coming out of an open date. With Arkansas, and you've made the point about their schedule. Look, Alabama A&M is a money game, and the Hogs will blow them out to open the season. But then it's three really tough games, or potentially
Yes.
really tough games right before that, and two of those away from home. And so by the time that Notre Dame plays Arkansas, it's not out of the realm that Arkansas could be 2-2 already. And if the Hogs are 2-2 already, they won't call the Hogs with the same fervor. They'll be calling the hot seat board for Sam Pittman, who's a great man. I really, really like Sam Pittman. But the fact of the matter is, Arkansas, I think, has a definite chance of being 2-2 when Notre Dame gets there. If Arkansas is 4-0 when Notre Dame gets there, look out. The place will be crazy town banana land.
I almost Well, it'd be a little bit scarier if Arkansas was 4-0 if they won at Ole Miss and won at Memphis and held serve with Arkansas State at home. But look, it's college football, man. I don't think any of that is crazy, which is why I mean I learned from the best. I learned from Lou Holtz to always look at what can go wrong in a football game, and he was always conscious of that, and that can certainly can happen on the road in the SEC against a team like Arkansas. We're going to wrap up there. We will be back on Thursday. I want to remind everybody that Thursday, July 31st, when practice begins, it's going to be a long day for us. It's going to start early and drift into the afternoon. So our podcast won't come until later in the day. I believe we'll have Drew Mentak joining. You're available Thursday, right, JB, in the afternoon?
Yeah, I believe so. I think so. Yeah.
Drew Mentak will be there. Tim O'Malley will be back next week. And so until then, I'm Tim Priester from Irish Illustrated. That's John Bryce from Football Scoop. I almost said Inside Scoop, thinking
Yeah,
about
we'll take it.
Irish Illustrated Insider. All right, we're going to wrap up there. Thanks for joining us. Tim Priester, John Bryce. This has been Irish Illustrated Insider.